This is not a stagnant disorder, by the way. Some of you who are familiar with the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders, it's always in revision. Asperger's syndrome is no longer in there. Manic depression no longer in there. They've done away with ADD. So, and it's not because they're necessarily changing their mind about things, but we evolve over time. Information on Asperger's syndrome, for example, which its first entry in the DSM was in '94. A lot of things have changed since that time. There's better diagnostic tools. There's better intervention strategies, better therapy. There's not as much stigma involved. And that's just the short list of how a disorder can change or become eliminated. In fact, it's predicted that ASD level 1 will eventually disappear. Asperger's syndrome is already gone. And high-functioning autism will not even be in, it's predicted by some, it won't be in there. Because there is a school of thought amongst some individuals, professionals too, that we're talking about ASD level 1 brain, there is some suggestion that that's the way that the human brain is evolving. On that topic, I might want to just explore that a little bit further, because with ASD level 1, you have a ton of strengths, but we can also say that some of these strengths cause problems. For example, you'll be able to relate to some of this, if not all of this. If your spouse has ASD level 1, he probably thinks critically. He has high expectations, especially in his field of interest. He can be very self-critical. You may not have noticed that in him because it's probably hidden, and it operates at a very unconscious level. But most guys, we're talking about guys, on the autism, they're very critical of themselves, and they have very low self-esteem. In large part because of childhood issues. They also can evaluate others. At face value, especially if you're not a neurotypical wife, you might think, oh, those are great skills. Problems, though, that come with that package is he can be critical and intolerant of others, and he may become discouraged or depressed very easily, and he is often perfectionistic, which in some cases, that's a good thing, and too many cases, it's not. Another strength would be he may have a large vocabulary, and he may have a broad base of knowledge in a particular area, and that sounds great, right? But he also may use words to escape or avoid situations. He may present as someone who's a little on the ADHD side because he will become bored very easily. If it's anything outside of his special interest, you come along, want to talk about the pretty rose bush in your backyard, he's zoned out. Probably doesn't even know that he's zoned out. And some people may view him as a know-it-all. Another strength would be he can concentrate very intensely for long periods of time. Long attention span in his area of interest. Very persistent, very goal-directed behavior. You might, oh, that's great. Well, not so much for you. Because now he's going to resist interruptions. He's going to neglect certain duties that you probably need him to do. He's not going to be very adept at focusing on stuff that falls out of his special interest. And he may just come off to you as just being very stubborn. And his agenda is his agenda, and your agenda is not involved. Another strength would be he will have a very inquisitive attitude. He will have a lot of intellectual curiosity. He will be intrinsically motivated. In other words, there's something that he wants to do. He won't need any outside moral support to get it done. He's self-motivated in that regard. Sounds great, right? Possible problems is he asks a lot of questions, sometimes embarrassing questions. He can be very strong-willed. He may resist your direction or your input or your attempt to be a good influence. Another one that we've mentioned probably in this group is he's definitely very autonomous. He prefers individual work. He's very reliant, self-reliant. It's a great skill, except with you. So the problem that comes with that package is he has probably often rejected your input. Another strength would be periods of intense effort. For example, I'll make something up off the top of my head. He has a project at work that maybe falls into his area of special interest, and you have a spouse who works overtime. He has a regular 8 to 5 job. He doesn't get home till 8. I run into that a lot. And by the time he gets home, he's so burnt out, he's got nothing left for any kind of socializing or emotional connection. He will tend to enjoy organizing things. He's great at systematizing. He's great at thinking in pictures. That's great. Problem that comes with that package, though, he constructs complicated rules or systems in his head that he has not articulated to you because he hasn't really identified them either. He just knows that they operate at an unconscious level. He will have some hidden rules on what is acceptable to him and what is not. He won't even be able to put his finger on it. He just knows when you violate one of those rules. And to you, that may come off as he's very bossy, rude, domineering, and so on. Probably mention one more strength, and that is the ability to conceptualize and synthesize. This is perhaps the indication of a very logical brain that can think mathematically. He probably enjoys problem solving and intellectual activity. Unfortunately, that's not a social or emotional activity. The problem with that particular strength is he may reject details that you see that he doesn't. He may omit details that are in plain view for you, but he doesn't see them. And he will often tend to question your instructions or your directives. You will have a clear idea of how something should be done. And when you say, we need to do it this way, and then you get grilled because he doesn't fully understand it. I probably should mention weak central coherence too, because this is the inability to generalize and see the big picture. It's great that he could be hyper-focused on one aspect of something. That can come in very handy sometimes for real. We probably wouldn't have some of the technology and the engineering and computer programs and whatnot if that didn't happen. But if you hyper-focus on one detail to the exclusion of seeing the global gestalt picture, then you can imagine the difficulties there. So traits of weak central coherence, I haven't talked about that in this group because I usually don't use that fancy term. I just say that they have a hard time seeing the big picture. But if your ASD spouse has weak central coherence, you will know because he will hate to have his routine interrupted and he will hate to have his structure changed. He dislikes disruption. If he's hyper-focused on this thing and you come in and you try to get him to stop what he's doing and switch over to something that falls not even in the ballpark with his special interest, you may have run into some pushback. Also with weak central coherence, he's going to have a very strong need for structure. It's not a want, it's a need. And when that structure gets violated, you've gotten pushback and probably didn't even know what was happening. He's going to have the ability to hyper-focus on one activity for lengthy periods of time. He's going to put a lot of attention to parts of objects. He's going to have difficulty with sudden change. He's going to insist on things remaining the same. In some cases, he may have some savant skills. I wouldn't say I run into that a lot, but some of these guys with ASD level 1, they're so smart in a particular area that they are light years ahead of any neurotypical male brain on that same subject. So that's probably the long way around the bush to dovetail off of my original comment, which was it is predicted by some that this ASD level 1 is just going to be a different way of thinking. It's going to be one that's more task-oriented, focus on things, objects, tasks, systematizing math, problem solving, all of that. And then the emotional component, which is your strong point, is going to be way down the list. So I don't know. That's an interesting hypothesis. The fact that the human brain, that would be you too, is evolving that way. So in this little fantasy hypothesis, then in maybe 100 years or so, ASD level 1 would be so prominent that it wouldn't be a disorder anymore. They would be the majority, and the neurotypicals of 2022 would be in the minority.